Hello, my name's Leah Taylor. I'm a mesothelioma nurse specialist and team leader at Mesothelioma UK. And we're bringing you another in our series of interviews to give you a little insight into some of the people who work within mesothelioma care. And I'm delighted today to introduce Dr. Claire Gardner. Welcome, Claire. Dr. Gardner joins us from the University of Sheffield, where she's a senior research fellow, and she's also co-director of the Mesothelioma UK Research Centre. Welcome, Claire. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
If we just really want to give people a bit of an insight into some of the research that happens in mesothelioma and the sort of research you're involved in. So if it's okay, just as a start, if I can ask a little bit for you to tell us a little bit about you and your career and what you've done in previous roles.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I suppose my career first started back at university as an undergraduate, and I did an undergraduate degree in psychology at the University of Sheffield many years ago, too many years ago to count now. But I really enjoyed that degree in psychology and learned a lot from it, of course. But I got to the end of my degree and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go next, whether to work in psychology or to move into other areas of healthcare. So I took a couple of years off, as people often do at that age, and sort of travelled the world and had lots of fun, and then came back and gave some more thought really to where I wanted to take my career, and decided to register for a PhD. And I think at that stage I hadn't really committed to a career in research, and I wasn't completely set that that was what I wanted to do with my career. But I suppose I really sat down and thought, if I do this PhD and dedicate 3 years, a long time really, to doing some more education and some more learning, at the end of the PhD, I can't really envisage any position that I would be in where having a PhD on my CV is going to, be anything but a good thing. So even though I wasn't completely committed to going into research at that stage, I thought I'm going to do a PhD because it'll open up lots of opportunities for me, and as I said, I think it will always be a good thing to have on my CV. So I did my PhD again in psychology, and that was all about sleep, and about sleep particularly in children, and how sleep affects learning. So completely different research area to what I'm involved in now. Really fascinating, really interesting area of research, but really quite a niche topic, a really niche area. So I'd spent 3 years studying this very particular area of sleep medicine, and came out of my PhD with lots of knowledge about this very particular topic, but also, I think more importantly than that, I developed skills as a researcher. And I think for me that was probably the most valuable thing I got out of my PhD, was actually learning how to be an effective researcher and how to undertake rigorous and robust research. So then at the end of my PhD, I was in a really good position then. I had lots of transferable skills, and I was in a good position to sort of look for onwards employment. And by that stage, I had decided that I did want to continue with a career in research. But as I said, the very sort of specific area of my PhD wasn't something that it was particularly easy to carry on researching in. So I looked around for lots of different opportunities in healthcare research, and ended up being offered a postdoctoral opportunity working on a study that was looking at palliative care needs in patients with respiratory disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. And then that work as a postdoctoral researcher then led to my career interest really in palliative and end-of-life care research and research into ageing. And I've been working in that area of research now for over 10 years. I think that answers that question probably. Yeah. Is that sufficient?
I mean, I know you're a prolific writer. You've got, I think, about 70 articles published, and I can just see that plethora of files behind you, that you've done countless pieces of research. What has led you, to kind of to come into mesothelioma research? How has that come about?
Yeah, sure. So as I've said, my main focus of research over the last 10 years or so has really been older people and palliative and end-of-life care. And Of course, palliative and end-of-life care have a really important role in mesothelioma, but I hadn't specifically been involved in mesothelioma research until a couple of years ago, really. And at that time, I was approached by Professor Angela Todd, who, of course, many people will know of, who has a huge expertise in mesothelioma research. And Angela and I work in the same departments at the University of Sheffield. And Angela approached me and asked if we wanted to do some work together and to collaborate, bringing my background in palliative and end-of-life care and her background in mesothelioma research to do some collaborative research together. And since then, we've been building on the research that we've been doing together. And then last year, we put in a joint tender to host the Mesothelioma UK Research Centre at the University of Sheffield, and of course that was successful. And then we were able to launch the research centre last year. So, as I said, my background in palliative care is really relevant for mesothelioma, and there's lots of things that I take from my background research in palliative care that are really relevant issues in mesothelioma. And just to give you an example, one of the excuse me, one of the areas of research that I've been really interested in over the last few years is looking at the financial cost of illness and ill health, and looking at how much it costs you as an individual if you're diagnosed with something like mesothelioma, or even if you're the carer of someone with mesothelioma. And we know from lots of the evidence and lots of the research that I've done, that even though we have the NHS, which of course is fantastic and provides us with free healthcare, actually at the individual level, a lot of patients are facing quite a significant financial burden as a result of having something like mesothelioma or another incurable condition. So that's a real area of interest of mine that I've taken from my other research disciplines, but it's something that I'm really interested to explore in mesothelioma. And of course the situation in mesothelioma is even more complex, because of course you have the possibility of compensation and certain welfare payments. So that's a particular issue which is really interesting to sort of explore.
Yeah, absolutely. Very relevant, those financial issues, aren't they? And I always think it's the hidden costs of cancer that, people don't see, they don't think about all those additional. So any work looking at that is so worthwhile, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
And if I can just ask you, Claire, because, when we talk about research, a lot of people kind of think, well, that's to do with new drugs and new treatments. But that's not what your research is necessarily about. So can you tell us kind of the difference with the type of research you do, and why that's just as important?
Yeah, sure. So the Mesothelioma Research Centre at Sheffield really focuses on what we call patient experience research. And that is research which focuses on really just that, on the experiences of people who have mesothelioma and their family and their informal carers. And of course, there's lots of research out there, really important and very valuable research, which looks at different treatment options, and there's clinical trials ongoing all the time, which are looking at different ways and different types of treatment that can help people with mesothelioma. Those sorts of studies are absolutely vital and really, really important. But what's also necessary to complement that kind of research is the research that we are doing, which, as I've said, looks actually what's the experience of these patients who have this condition. What are the real challenges that they face? What are the most difficult parts of their journey? What are the pros and cons of the various treatments they're offered? How are they enabled to make decisions about their care? What information do they need? How is that best communicated? So there's all these really complicated questions, very much related to the individual and the experience they have of living with that condition and the family member that surrounds that person. And those sorts of questions are really important to answer, because they help us to inform how we provide services for patients with mesothelioma. And what we want to do when we deliver services, when we deliver healthcare, is to make sure we have the best impact and the most benefit for patients. And that's really what we're trying to do with the research centre, understand more about the patient's experiences so we can use that information to inform how services are delivered, how they're organised, how health policy informs the structure and delivery of healthcare, and those sorts of issues which are of equal importance really to developing new treatments and new drugs for mesothelioma.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking, if we don't get the experience right, then, you know, something is really lost, isn't it? Because it's not all about that treatment. It's about the patient experience from the moment they walk through the door, you know, and getting that level of experience right for each patient.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And in terms of the research you're involved in at the moment within mesothelioma, can you give us a bit more information about what you're currently involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, the research centre formally launched last year, but Angela and some of our other colleagues at the university have been working on mesothelioma research for a good few number of years. So we're in a really good position to I'm just going to have to move my cat. I'm sorry about this. This is the perils of home working.
This is real life and working at home. That's absolutely fine.
So as I was saying, we're in a really good position to kind of hit the ground running with the research of the centre. And some of the key projects that we've started with are two main projects. One's called a rapid review of evidence, and the other is a research prioritisation exercise. And just to give you a little bit of an overview of what those two projects are about, the rapid review is us looking at what evidence has been published already about the patient experience in mesothelioma. And obviously the reason for us doing that is to try and understand what's already known in this area and what questions remain really for us to be able to answer as a research centre. So we have a methodology for doing that, for collating really all of the published evidence out there so that we can bring that all together, and then we'll know what's been done, what do we need to be doing next. The other exercise is what we call a research prioritisation exercise. And that's really just a way of us finding out, you know, what are the most important topics for research in this area, in mesothelioma and in patient experience research. Where do we need to be targeting our research over the next 3 years of the research centre? What are the most important priorities for research? And again, there's a specific research methodology that we follow to undertake that exercise. But one of the really important parts of that exercise is actually involving the wider mesothelioma community and getting out there and speaking to people who've got personal experience of mesothelioma and getting their input on what's important to them. You know, what do they think we should be researching in mesothelioma? So over the coming months, we'll be putting out some calls on our website and on our social media, asking people from the broader meso community to help us with that exercise. So anybody who's got an interest in mesothelioma, whether that's a patient or a carer or a clinician or somebody who works for an asbestos support group or a lawyer or anybody really who's got an interest in this area, can get involved in that exercise and can really play a role in helping to inform the future direction of research. So those are the two main projects we've got going on at the moment. There's also lots of other smaller pieces of work that we're working on as well. We've got another study looking specifically at palliative care needs of patients with mesothelioma and how we can support them. Of course, COVID is you know, the forefront of everyone's minds at the moment, and we've got another piece of work working with Meso UK, looking at the impact that COVID's had on mesothelioma patients, which has been really, really huge. Other smaller projects on mesothelioma in education workers. Another project looking at some of the data that Mesothelioma UK have collected from the More Patient Experience Survey back in 2019 and doing some analyses of that data. So we've got a real broad range of projects. I've probably forgotten one or two. I'm not going to go through actually every single one because it would take me too long, but I suppose, you know, if people are interested in learning more about the different projects that we've got going on at the Research Centre, then have a look at our website. If you just Google Mesothelioma UK Research Centre Sheffield, you should find our website easily enough.
So many, you know, really worthwhile projects, and it's amazing, isn't it, in what's, you know, considered a rare disease, and, you know, we think very little is known about it, you know, compared to some of the major cancers, but actually such a massive amount of research. It's really scratching the surface, isn't it, of what research you can do. And as we said, so important to do that research alongside, you know, that search for new and better treatments. So important to understand all of that about people's experiences and, you know, all those other elements to mesothelioma.
Yeah, that's it. You're absolutely right. And as I said before, everything that we do at the research centre is really underpinned by a commitment to make some change. You know, we want to be able to benefit the care of people with mesothelioma, and that's our absolute number one priority in the research that we do at the research centre. Is our primary outcome has to be, you know, we make things better for people, and there's lots of different ways we can do that, but that's our primary outcome, as we want to, you know, have a positive change.
Yeah. And if someone was to take part in some research that you were doing, what form might that take? What would what could they expect in terms of what they would have to do to take part?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And at the moment, one of the things we're doing at the research centre is setting up what we call a patient and public involvement panel, or a PPI panel for short. And the PPI panel is a group of people who have personal experience of mesothelioma, and that's mostly patients and family members or informal carers. And that group of people works with us very closely as a research centre to help inform all of the research we do. And I suppose, you know, acts as like a critical friend and really sort of asks us, is what you're doing in keeping with the needs of the mesothelioma patient population, you know, and making sure that what we're doing is actually responding to the needs of the mesothelioma community. So if there are people out there who are interested in being involved in research in some capacity, then absolutely, you know, actively recruiting people to that PPI panel at the moment. And if that's something that people would be interested in being a part of or involved in, then again, if you go to our website, there's a section of our website about the public and patient involvement panel, and people can get a bit more information there. And yeah, that's a sort of a route in, I suppose, to having a bit more in-depth involvement in research over the period of the research centre.
And if you are sort of, you know, recruiting participants to take part in a specific study, I know there's various ways you might do that, isn't there? Because sometimes I think there's a worry that we might overburden people who've already got so much going on, having had been diagnosed and going through treatment and, you know, possibly thinking about trials and all of that kind of thing, especially at the moment. You know, living is just tougher at the moment, isn't it? Getting through every day, you know, and keeping yourself motivated. So there's always a bit of a worry, I think, among professionals that we might overburden people if we ask them to take part in research. So if someone was taking part in a particular research study talking about experience, for example, what sort of methods might you use to kind of gather that information from them?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And what you're saying about not wanting to overburden patients and their families is, you know, it's really important, and it's a really important concern for people to have. But I suppose, you know, there is research evidence now that actually people can take a lot of positive benefit from being involved in research as a participant, even if there's no material benefit to themselves as an individual. Actually, that sense of altruism, of participating in something for the greater good, actually gives a lot of benefit to people and gives them a real sense of meaning. So I think that's, you know, important to remember that there is that evidence out there, and also that when we invite people to participate in research, we're inviting them, and we're not telling them they have to be. And it's important to give people a choice and make that a real choice, and not make it you know, a one-sided choice. And make sure that people have all the information they need really about whether or not to participate, and make it okay for people to say, actually, no, I don't think I want to do that. That's too much for me. And, you know, make sure that people are well enough informed that they can make that decision. So I think that's really important to remember as well, that we need to make sure people are well informed. And then in terms of your other question about what might be involved if someone is involved in a research study, the sorts of research that we're doing at the research centre, often it's what we call qualitative research. And I appreciate that's a term that many people might not be familiar with. And so I don't want to talk too much in research language, but essentially qualitative research is talking to people and having conversations with people and analysing the detail of that conversation, I suppose. So often it's hearing people's stories, hearing people's narratives, and then really trying to unpick and learn from those narratives what important messages are trying to come through. So that's a big part of the research that we do at the Research Centre, is this qualitative research. So often if we ask people to be involved, it might just be a case of having a conversation with one of our researchers for an hour or half an hour, or filling in a short survey or something like that. So the sort of research that we do doesn't generally involve people having to go to hospital or visit trial centres or have any medication or any tests or anything like that. It's much more, can be done from home, can be done at a distance, and as I've said, conversations, surveys, those sorts of data collection methods are what we generally use at the Research Centre.
Yeah. And I think, you know, from personal experience, you know, you're looking for opinions of healthcare professionals as well, aren't you? And, you know, by the powers of modern technology like we're using today, I was part of a focus group last week, as you know, because, you know, you were also there. So, you know, it's kind of using all the resources around you, isn't it? All of those thoughts and opinions, and but using the wonders of modern technology that we've been forced to embrace recently, you know, where it's been difficult to get a group of nurses from different places together in a room. Now it's the touch of a button, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And we, you know, we're really lucky that we do have that technology at hand where we can do things like that. And there's a lot of, I mean, COVID's been obviously extremely difficult for everybody, but, you know, to look at the positives of it, we are collecting a lot more data online now using some of these tools, this Skype and the Zoom and, you know, Microsoft Teams and all the rest of it. And that does mean that we can link in with people who perhaps we wouldn't have been able to have linked in with. If someone's in the Outer Hebrides or in another country on the other side of the world, we can still link in with those people now because of the use of technology. So I think there's a lot of pros to these ways of communicating now. You know, there's some cons as well. I appreciate that not everybody might have access to technology and you know, might not be able to use the technology, but you know, I think broadly speaking, a lot of what we do has been, you know, really enabled by the use of technology.
Yeah, that's great. And what sort of time frame, you know, does the research, say one individual project, does it differ based on the project, or is there a sort of time frame you'd be working to for a particular project?
So the Research Centre has been funded initially for 3 years, and so majority of our projects will fit within that timescale. But really, I mean, research projects can be anything from sort of 6 months upwards to 3 years and beyond that. So the work of the Research Centre will probably be looking at a combination of some smaller projects, which might only be 6 months or so, and then some larger pieces of work informed by our prioritization exercise, which will be longer term and collects more of that longitudinal data over a longer period of time.
And how do you aim to share the results of your research?
Yeah, that's a really important question. As academics, as people who work at university, the traditional way to share findings from research projects has been to write up the article and submit it to a scientific journal, and then the findings are published as a journal article or as a paper, you might hear it called. And that still continues and is a really important way of having some peer external review of the research that we do. So that will be an important part of the way that we disseminate our research findings. But I think that form of dissemination often doesn't get through to actually the patients and the family members at the end of the line, because they're published in these very fusty scientific journals. Often you have to pay a subscription to be able to read the papers. The language that is used is often a little bit impenetrable. So of course they have an important place, but I think it's really important to have other types of communication strategy as well, so that, you know, it's a bit more accessible. So we'll be using lots of different ways, like our website, publishing findings on there, our Twitter account, our social media accounts, again, a really useful and important way to communicate our findings. Things like the Meso UK webinars, we'll be participating in those to talk about our research findings and publishing the findings in things like Mesothelioma Matters and via, you know, publications like that that are more directly read by patients and their family members. So there's a really wide range of different sort of strategies that we'll use to try and make sure that everybody can make use of the findings that we publish.
And again, it's kind of using that, embracing the modern technology, isn't it, to get it out there, rather than, as you say, those, you know, the dusty journals that eventually, you know, they end up in the library and nobody looks at. And as you say, trying to find those online for free can be really, really difficult.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, kind of getting the research out there is what's important, isn't it? Not keeping it covered up and protected.
It is, yeah. And
Yeah.
also, you know, if we want to, as I said, the priority for us is that we make change. And if we want to make things change, we want to improve things, actually we need to have our information in an accessible way. And if we want to inform government policy, say, it's no use producing a 300-page report because an MP or a government minister is not going to read that, and we need to be, you know, aware of that. So it's just being aware of how we target different groups differently to make sure that the research that we do has the maximum impact.
Yeah. Oh, that's, you know, it's really excellent to have you on board. Obviously, we've worked with Professor Angela Todd for a long time, and she's certainly, you know, she's part of the fixtures and fittings at Meso UK. So, you know, it's really great to work with you as well, Claire. And thanks so much for giving us, you know, an insight into what you do. And I think it's a really exciting time, and, you know, we look forward to working with you and, you know, and really contributing to this body of research. And so just to kind of end again, just if you could clarify for people where they can go to find a bit more information and getting involved.
Yeah, sure. So we have a website which is part of the University of Sheffield website, the Mesothelioma UK Research Centre. If you Google that, that's probably the best way to find it. If you go onto our website, you can sign up for our mailing list, and then you will receive regular updates and the newsletter about the research centre. So that's a really good way to stay in touch with us at the centre. The other good way to keep in touch is via Twitter. So our Twitter account is meso_Sheffield. So please do give us a follow on Twitter if you haven't already. And again, that's another kind of quick and easy way to get in touch with us.
That's great. Thank you, Claire. Obviously, there's always the Mesothelioma UK website, Facebook page, and our information line, which is 0800 169 2409. So any questions, just give us a call. But thanks so much, Claire. It's been really, really good to speak to you today, and I'm sure, you know, people listening will feel a lot more informed about the sort of research that you're doing. Really important research. So thank you.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
You're welcome.